After returning to Candlekeep, feasting on deep-fried sweet rock crab cakes and gulping down a full flagon of particularly sweet and warming mead, I made my way up the many flights of old, age-worn, bowed stone steps to my more or less permanent quarters, the northwest outer tower. Now, just recently thawed out, it was in quite a state when I opened my door. Several winters had passed. There was a pile of wind-blown soot shaken loose from the chimney, from the coastal storms of several seasons. Quite a few piles of white and grey feathers of seagulls, eaten by my pseudo-dragon friend Macrotaxel, but at least he kept the vermin from eating all of my books, and my collection was looking dusty, but healthy. I got the chambers into more or less a swept, dusted and aired-out state, lit a cheery yellow fire from southern softwood that had an aroma similar to frankincense, nutmeg and lemon, relieved myself of all my travelling gear, and emptied out my bags of holding. This is where I froze, staring at the number of full travel journals there were alongside my travelling spellbooks. I resisted the urge to grab one of the journals at random, instead organising them by the numbers I wrote on the spine. Where I reached the last one, I remembered writing at least, and then I opened the cover of the first journal I had no recollection of filling. I had visited Deep Imaskar, and I had no memory of it. I knew before I got home that something had happened. 3 years had passed, and from these chronicles, I present here for the first time to any beyond the deeply layered demi-planes, an accounting of the domesticated beholders commonly found among the many cultures of the Deep Imaskari descendants. First, a note on one of the dangers of dimensional travel. Time dilation can occur when occupants of an artificially created demiplane alter the flow of time within it, compared to the ethereal and prime material planes it is connected to outside of it. For the Deep Imaskari, the planet Toril exists in their ancient past, forever locked in its original glacial flow of time. The Deep Imaskari experience thousands of years of life, and yet many, many generations of them have lived and died within their own private planes, housed deep within the endless ethereal expanse. While they live for thousands of years, each of those years passes by in a moment back outside the demi-planes. This is the second reason the Imaskari descendants no longer have any interest in leaving their own private dimensions. Over those eons, the Artificer Kings and their families have advanced their science to a very impressive, often frightening degree. They also managed to develop new areas of biological magic that took me some getting used to. Not since I had the misfortune of learning a lot about the science of the Mind Flayers have I seen anything close to what the modern descendant races have done with beholders. And that's as good a place as any to start, I guess. This was the first entry in my journal, the creatures the Imaskari descendants simply called holders. The first I saw was modified to be some sort of a hovering vehicle that carried the group of people who came to investigate what and then who I was. This was not as difficult as I thought it would be. They used magic so we understood each other. They could clearly see I was one of the original pink-skinned version of their own species. And they were, well, from my sketchbook and descriptions, they were quite spectacular. Their modifications of the beholders was just a more extreme version of what they were doing to themselves for generations. There was not one person who I met who I could say was not modified in dozens of ways. Their skin color was currently following some sort of a shifting metallic style. They struck me at first glance as resembling the golden-skinned Rilmani, and then the chaotic metallic rainbow hues of the Spellscale race. But it was also under their mental control, and their colorations shifted with their moods. Their clothing was mainly just simple bodysuits with practical pockets, with a loose sort of transparent and very bright cloth like a desert robe that billowed as they moved. Their body was further decorated with all manner of small circlets, rings, bracelets and such, all of sumptuously precious metals and jewels. They casually displayed material wealth that would have made Mammon envious, and their mastery of the magical arts was clearly far beyond anything I had ever seen. Even the mages of Helruer would have been walking around with their mouths gaping open. I witnessed these people gesture at solid objects that simply liquefied and reformed into new objects with what appeared to be nothing but their own desire and imagination being the limit. They were people who had achieved the power of the gods. Holders were everywhere. The more I looked, the more I found. Even for the very brief time I was there, I found dozens of them. There were small ground-based holders which seemed to act like street cleaners and pest control, and it was explained to me that their realms had few issues other than ethereal vermin, as they called them. The thought eaters, for example, and something they called the leech ravid, which fed on the strongest flows of udura, or liquid magic, which is something I recall reading about in my studies of the last days of the Netheril Empire. The descendants knew exactly what I meant when I said the word Imaskar, and they smiled at me like I was a clever child, and one of them stepped forward, looming over me as they were about 7 feet tall, then reached out and touched my forehead with a single finger, and my mind just simply flooded with images from their history. From my journal, I take it this was quite an experience, and I am profoundly frustrated that this memory has been robbed from me. But after some time, I have found notes I scribbled down hastily about their history, and it did prepare me much better for my later encounters with the Mulf and the World Chambers. This individual also slipped a gift around my neck, some sort of a simple golden neck torque that they said I must wear at all times, lest the world I left behind fade to dust before I returned. Now, I was not aware of the extreme time differential, of course, but I am very, very lucky I only lost 3 years of my life, so to speak. If I had remained without that protection, going deeper into those demi-planes, it would have been centuries that I was gone, not just a few years. Climbing aboard their living vehicle, I felt the senses of the holder scanning me, and I must admit, I felt very wary of the thing. How could I not? This was an aberration, something that simply should not be in the material planes. But then, of course, I had no more business being in this place than it did, and this was not the material plane. Travel on the hovering holder was brief, as it simply veered toward a passage between 2 large rocky structures, and we passed right through a portal and into a completely different environment. Gone was the outskirts of some massive city of exotic spires, towers, citadels, and lush parks. Now we drifted smoothly across what looked like a large manicured lawn more than anything else, with a drop-away edge and some huge void beyond it, in which drifted entire planets that were being constructed, bit by bit as we passed by. I saw the closest planet go from a ball of brown to a patchwork of landmasses and a shallow ocean separating them, an ocean which was becoming deeper by the minute. And the group I was with often glanced at me to witness the effect such a sight had on me, but otherwise they did very little. They ignored my questions about the planets and just laughed. Why they were building these new worlds, I had no idea, and I still don't. We passed through another massive portal. This one was more like a series of golden triangles that rotated around and through each other in a manner that caused my brain some difficulty in figuring out where one triangle ended and another began. It was portal magic, as I'd never seen it before, something they had devised themselves over a very, very long time. As we passed through, I was confronted with new demi-plane structures that seemed impossible to me. These were not tightly confined spaces that existed like bubbles within the deep ethereal plane. These were nested somehow within each other and seemed to overlap like some sort of a Venn diagram. To cross from one to another, no portal was required at all, and our floating holder vehicles rode strong flows of wind that powered off the slopes of some great mountain peaks and down into lush tropical environments where the winds funneled into specific channels. And I realized that the floating islands I were looking at were all actually engineered to modify and direct the airflow, as one would bounce light from one mirror to another. Also, I should mention, I saw a great number of people who were simply flying under their own power, completely at ease with this chaotic reality they had made for themselves. And that was when a demi-plane passed us by. It was the size of a moon, I think, and I was informed that this was just a vehicle that was designed specifically for easily transporting populations and facilities through their nested demi-planes. While some were simply the equivalent of pleasure cruisers, they were largely left to their own devices, as some were from realms with a further, as they put it, time differential, meaning the occupants inside experience slower or faster passages of time compared to those outside the mobile demiplane, which I understood was common among those engaged in the massive projects such as the world building I witnessed earlier. Of course, this was all just the tip of the iceberg, and I could feel some excitement again from my guides as they turned to watch my reaction because we had arrived at one of their Nexus gates. I have 2 journals full, and I mean every bit of these journals is crammed with my writing. Even the covers have some smeared notes hastily scrawled on the leather. This is a subject for later though, where I tell you as much as I recorded about the Mulf traders and the implications involved, but for now I shall skip ahead to where we settled down and I got to spend a short time living in a fairly typical settlement of the descendants of the imaskari. There are times when things in their diverse cultures seemed remarkably human. The way they played games, the way they ate meals together, their appreciation for community, and the strange urge of humans to live all together in a big fortified hive called a city. Even though they had limitless resources, absolute mastery of a stable and everlasting environment, they had every desire met by clever artifice, still they were relentless explorers, and sadly they had fallen victim many times to their own dramas, born of nothing other than their own nature. Their inevitable branching out into separate groups and the conflicts between families which became cultures in and of themselves. Tribalism seemed to be something even the most advanced and spectacular humans couldn't do anything to avoid. I would call it a bittersweet, that sense of sadness, because it also made me happy that even with all their power and the eons of isolation, these were still humans, unmistakably humans. They still had all the same emotions, they still went through childhood and their teenage years, they still had that restless spirit of adventure that humans cherish so much. It gave me great hope for the future. My great interest in all things biological did not go unnoticed, and the place I eventually was housed for a couple of nights was the home of Wulin Isman and her family, 2 husbands and a small tribe of children who were obsessed with me for the first day and barely noticed me the next. It seemed I was not as interesting as I thought. I can't blame those kids, not when they had better things to do, such as playing war games with their own golem teams. Let me tell you, that is a sport. Anyway, the holders come in a vast array of types. Some are little more than semi-sapient tools, others are highly intelligent, but have all of the beholder's most undesirable traits bred or engineered right out of them somehow. Wulin Isman showed me racks of crystals where she said I could read at will with telepathy. I told her I didn't have that power, so she just instructed this large jelly cube in the corner of her laboratory to produce a series of books in which I could slowly read through thousands of years of information on mage-bred monsters, the anatomy of aberrations, and the specific role of the beholders in the multiverse. This was stunning information. Beholders were created for a reason. Unfortunately, their creator god was now locked away, cut off from all its creations and referred to mainly as the Chained God. I think I may have probably staggered away from the books at this point, clutching my head and screaming apologies to Vecna himself, but it seemed that, in this place at least, I was safe from the influence and punishment of all of the gods, and would later travel to the multiplanar nexus of Sigil and confirm the information I gathered with one of the ancient Bartorians who fought in the Eternal Blood War, but that's a story for another day. As aberrations, beholders don't seem to be possible. The near endless magical energy they can shoot out of their many eyes, their ability to simply float and glide around, their near metallic density and durability of their flesh and thick hide. Beholders were brought with the imaskari when they fled from a catastrophic slave uprising on Toril and unexpected war with the pantheon of the gods. Little is known of the first centuries of the imaskari exile, though it is known that they were forced to adapt their biology to a life spent in the Underdark at first. Their population was so low in their early days that all imaskari descendants carry this legacy. But they have long since departed Toril, and with their studies of the ancient portals and planar magic of the batraachi race, they gradually became more at home in demi-planes, fully constructing a permanent gateway, which they then sealed off via the magic of the Feywild. And from what I gather, somehow they managed to manifest some sort of an effect in the Feywild which powers their original gateway basically forever, as long as some version of a very specific story continues to be told. Sadly, I don't know what that story is. I never put anything about it in any of my journals, and of course the power of the Feywild causes those who pass back through the gateway onto planet Toril to forget everything about the Imaskari Empire and the precise location of that gateway. Take it from me, it's very effective, and there is nothing the Imaskari descendants care to do about it. It has served them exactly as intended for thousands of years. This effect also influenced the original stock of the beholders, as the Fey energy was used to modify the very dreams of the aberrations, which in turn crafted special types of beholders called makers. The makers still exist in a very highly modified state, Their senses are controlled by the imaskari artificers, and their dreams entered via self-contained color veils within demiplanes crafted to perform one of the natural functions of the zone between the border and deep ethereal plane. I know this is complicated, but trust me, this is just training wheel stuff they teach their kids in Deep Imaskar. The primary form of goods that the Molf trade with other transdimensional species is exactly this sort of magical technology. Finely crafted bespoke laws of reality made to order or sold as compressed prefabricated nodes, which avoid such tremendous personal cost to whoever individual or group is creating a new demiplane. There have been many eras within their very accelerated timeline, including wars where planar magic was turned into weaponry. Again, beholders were pivotal tools, able to survive in extreme reality breakdowns and create pockets of stability in squadrons directed by imaskari artificers, who did their best to restore shattered, warped and reprogrammed demi-planar warheads. There are a lot of question marks on these pages of the journals. I tried to absorb as much of this information as I could, but I simply don't have a mind capable of handling that sort of thing all at once. I hope I can find a way to trade these notes with the Lich Larlock one day, but doing so will most likely see me transformed into a cursed Nothic. A few journals to go though, as I unlock these secrets over the coming months. You can learn about the lost civilization of the Deep Imaskari descendants along with me. I'll do my best to piece it all together and hope that this is all actually true and not just a load of insane babble brought on by near-fatal numbers of stings from angry dragon beetles. I choose to believe the former. In the meantime, thank you for joining me once more. Just a reminder to viewers, this is all a work of my own fiction here, based on the stubs of lore recorded at the very end of the Imaskari Empire, and some notes on the Deep Imaskari human subrace from 3.5 editions Underdark sourcebooks. Thanks for listening. Please like and subscribe for more, and I'll be back with more for you very soon.